Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman, and I am joined today by Amy Gonzalez and Andrea Gross and Paul Rossi, our special guest, Paul Rossi, who's been on the channel before. So, Amy and Andrea are, as I put in the description, they're canaries in the coal mine for parents who've been labeled physical threats. You probably heard even some of you public school parents like domestic terrorists. They are representing, though, the private school perspective. We talk a lot about public school, and a lot of people are under the impression that private school doesn't have this going on because, the parents pay and they're consumers and all this. And Amy and Andrea are here to dispel some myths. And Paul, who's done significant research into this topic, is going to help us. So what happened with them is, and they'll tell their story in more detail, but their headmaster alerted the FBI in April of 2021. And so they're coming here to, about their complaints and concerns. And they're coming here to discuss what happened when they asked Columbus Academy, which is an NIAS school, that's the National Association of Independent Schools. What are you teaching our children? Their innocent children were expelled in retaliation against their parents. So, again, they should be responsive. Really? Their kids were expelled. So a race-based curriculum was easier to force on these private schools than even in the public schools. So whether public or private, parents have to stand up and speak out for the children, because there may be consequences, but it has to be done. And so they are here to talk to us and share their story. And I cannot thank you enough for being here, because I know this has been a very trying time for you. So welcome.
Well, basically, Amy was very, very involved in the school in terms of volunteering, as was I. My husband had been a part of Columbus Academy for over 40 years. It's just one of the loves of his life. It's just, I think, a school that he feels like gave him a lot of stability at a time when he really needed it. And I think it's what he feels like really made him a man and a critical thinker, and somebody who feels like someone that needs to, be a good member of the community, all those things. But so basically, we were all in. We had all been volunteering in various ways. My husband served on the board for 6 years. And so what we started to notice was that when our headmaster came to the school in 2013, we started to now be accredited by the National Association of Independent Schools. And I would say Amy and I would agree, even at that time, we really didn't know what that meant at all. We had no idea what that meant in terms of what that was going to mean as an overhaul of our entire school and the mission statement, the contract, the motto. Really everything about the school changed over those 8 years, kind of slowly in the beginning, but then more severely, I would say, in the past 2 years. And so we started to see where our director of diversity and community life was referring to our community as 110 years of white supremacy. They were separating our faculty and our students by the color of their skin. Ibram Kendi was being taught at professional faculty. They have no choice over what they get to be taught. So these are the questions we were asking. Also basic questions about how do you get on our board of trustees? We were being told over and over again at various levels that we were going to throughout the school that, basically people would go in, we would find out other parents ask about various things, and they would be told either you're the only one that feels that way, or they would be given the okay, yes, and then basically it would just be brushed to the side and nothing would be done. So it's like
it's your children's perception,
or it's your perception, nothing. So basically,
So your kids were coming home and saying this was happening. Or did you?
Lots of kids. I mean, my daughter was in the upper school, so I think she noticed it. Those students, I think, are more aware of what's happening to them versus
able to articulate
when you're younger. But there was a supposed celebration of Martin Luther King, which was not that at all. It was a very, they said it was organically created by the students, which it was not. It was scripted by the school. It was organized by the school. And at that point, students were yelling at each other, "You're a racist. You're a racist because you didn't get to the gym fast enough." They were having it was chanting Malcolm X. So Black Power, it was not a celebration of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are not the same at all. And that's the problem, is that our kids don't understand the difference anymore. So when that happened, a lot of parents were upset. And that's when Amy and I had already been, to be honest with you, noticing and really figuring out a lot of these things. But that's when we ultimately realized there is a very large conglomerate of people at our school that have the same concerns. So that's when we decided that we would decided to write an open letter and an appendix. I am an attorney by background, so I just know that we needed to have it very specific. It needed to not be any kind of loose allegations. It had to be things that we knew were factual, provable, actual. So we spent, and we're very meticulous about making sure that that was accurate. And we wanted to just actually read it to our board of directors, which is 22 members. Knowing that that's such a large group, we were afraid that it would be disseminated throughout the school. So we did not want to email it to them. We wanted to read it to them. Sure. Our head of the board, Jonathan Cass, told us that he only speaks to other board members, so he would not speak to us. We tried multiple different ways to get it to not only him, to see if we could speak to him. We tried to also speak to the board through the assistant head of the school. All of them told us that they don't speak to other board members. So then we asked, so that was one of our questions. Even my husband having been on the board, I couldn't tell you how you get on the board. Nobody knows. It's very opaque. So that was one of our questions then. How do you get on the board then if you won't talk to any of us and you won't answer any of our questions about what is happening with the curriculum? Are you reading these books? Are you not reading these books? What is going on? We had to email it to the board because they would not talk to us. And then the board then decided to leak the documents to certain portions of the appendix, to certain people in the building to try to sway their opinion, to paint us as they were calling us, anti-Black, batshit crazy Republicans.
And, we just wanted to confront concerns with good ideas. And we just didn't realize, how that was going to be met with so much resistance.
We stayed on that campus where Amy continued to be the lower school parent. I was the 10th grade parent. I was the assistant lacrosse coach for 5 months while they were defaming us, calling the police on us, saying alerting the FBI, telling the kids that they were bringing in bomb sniffing dogs to the campus. We were just still holding our heads up and just trying to keep it going while our kids are still going to school there. And I mean, it was just like, as I look back on it now, I feel like I was almost living outside my body because
I can't.
Beyond.
Can you explain to the audience what NIS is, means, does, and not that they should have known, they couldn't have known, right? But I think when people hear the word accredited, they hear that's a good thing, right? Like accredited. And a lot of parents will even seek that out initially. Like, I only want to send my child to an accredited private school, whatever, or I want them to go to an NIS member school. Can you help the audience, most of whom don't have their kids in private school, perhaps understand what they are and what that means?
Sure, I can try. The NIS, National Association of Independent Schools, started in the early 60s, I think. But basically, it's an associate. There's a benign description, and then there's a real description. So just the nuts and bolts are that it's an association of member schools, 1,900 schools, 1,600 in the United States, and they tend to include like some of the most prestigious elite private schools in the country. And they offer support, data collection around demographics and school proficiencies and things around, as well as advice, conferences. And really, they're the center of an entire ecosystem that moves through these schools, where there's a revolving door with hiring, and there are DEI consultancies that are word of mouth that gets around, and board members. So a lot of the board members of the NIS association are also heads of school at these individual schools. So there are multiple jobs being done, very often by DEI consultants and who are also heads of schools in these schools. So there is a tremendous conflict of interest, which by their own documents, they say needs to be a concern. So they're in many ways, they're violating their own best practices. Right. in their messaging to the schools and in their packet of information, really, there's maybe 10 or 12 of these books that they give to each member school on how to handle troublesome parents like Andrea and Amy. And it really is a divide and conquer strategy. So you're to be treated as mentally ill. And they say that, they say 5% of parents are basically pathological. And if they cause too much trouble in the school, you need to just dismiss them, isolate them, whatever it takes. And that's certainly what they did to me as a teacher. What the strategy is, anyone who steps out of line and starts to ask too many pointed questions is going to be painted as an extremist. And they use that to scare the other parents and keep them in line. So what you experienced is not unusual. It is happening all over the place to varying degrees. You got a particularly, horrific implementation of it, but really, it's the ecosystem is national, and it is completely aligned with social justice ideology, social justice, critical theory, gender ideology. All of this is seen as desirable, progressive, and there's a messaging that comes from the top that's particularly obfuscatory, I guess, if that's a word, which is that we care about the students' well-being. So the Donna Orem, who's the head of the NIS, mentions well-being a lot. So well-being is seen as this desirable thing, and who could be against well-being?
Sure.
But what that is essentially a managing palliative strategy for children to explicitly try to calm any type of conflicts within the school. So well-being is actually a good byproduct of actual learning and achievement and accomplishment and success. Sure. Those things come out of doing well. But what they're doing is they're creating the shortcut and running these places like a camp counselor, essentially. They're not focused on skills and achievement anymore. They're focused on basically kind of either ideologically or with drugs, like calming the individual so that they don't make a fuss. And that's essentially what this is about.
Are they true believers in the ideological sense? Are they trying to take down the private schools? Are they trying to destroy these children? Are they trying to own them? Like, it's for most people, the biggest question mark is, but why? Like, I mean, this seems so transparently bad, right? If kids are calling each other racist in the hallways, if they're fighting with each other more, that's certainly the opposite of well-being. And I don't care what anybody says, even if Andrea and Amy were literally, pathological or whatever, how does it contribute to the well-being of their children to expel them?
We probably might be the only one, certainly no longer, to stay on campus and have this experience play out over such a long period of time.
Right.
Now it is almost immediately. If you ask a question, your children are out. There is a mom who was in Georgia. Maybe you can recall the name of the school, Paul, because it has totally slipped my mind. Her kids were expelled from school. She sent something out on social media, was told not to say anything further, never mentioned the school, but still spoke out about some things that she felt she disagreed with. And the day after Christmas, her kids were kicked out of the school. In Charleston, at the Charleston Day School, one of the board members, who also previously was a U.S. district attorney, questioned some of the practices of the school.
Financially.
Yeah, financially, which we had some questions around.
Yeah, we had financial
money.
questions about stuff too.
And again, your kids need to go.
And he was kicked off the board. So,
I mean, so certainly well-being for all kids is not at the forefront, because there's a lot of examples like this that are going on. Differences in how they're handling disciplinary situations that do not seem to be level and fair. I think money with the DEI, I mean, that is a whole business. I mean, basically the same things: money, power, control.
But I think I can only speak to what I've seen at Columbus Academy, because I was thinking the same thing. Like, what is the end game here? Like, why are people doing this? I don't understand. But I think that what I've seen is, in our situation, our headmaster, when she came, this is her ideology. This is 100%
So she's
what
a
she
true
believes.
believer.
And she
Okay.
was placed there on purpose. And the way that the NAIS works, you can literally have one person change an entire school.
Well,
because
it happened in our case.
Well, it happened in our case, because what they do then is, the board doesn't know what's happening. I mean, they make the board so large that they don't function like a board. That is really not what they are. They are supposed to calm the waters. That is supposedly their job, according to NAIS.
Well, and according to most recently, even a video by, Myra McGovern, which is the vice president of media at NAIS, and then Jim Hulbert, who works at the Jane Group. I mean, they're calling out, calm the waters. That's the job of the board.
When you have a board that doesn't function like a board, and they are told their only job is to have one person they are in charge of, which is the headmaster, and that headmaster comes and brings all of this stuff with them, and then basically neuters the board, they run the show. And the teachers have no power, because, like in our school, they don't have an HR department. They have nobody to go to. When all this was happening in our case, she literally had a meeting on Super Bowl Sunday with all the faculty and told them, including some of the things we were talking about were affidavits from teachers who felt like they were in a hostile work environment. She told all the faculty they are not allowed to talk about any of these things that Amy and I brought forward to anybody. They had to bring it only to her. So if someone's creating the environment that makes you uncomfortable, you're now only allowed to go to them to figure out how to vet your issue. That doesn't seem to be a workplace where you're going to be able to really speak your truth. You have to just toe the line.